Welcome, family. We're so excited to have you join us today at Honey Lake Clinic. Honey Lake Clinic is the only licensed Christian residential behavioral health treatment center in the world, and we're so happy that you could join us today. We're exceptionally happy today because we have Dr. Carl Benzio, who is our medical director. He is considered one of the finest psychiatrists in the world. And during this incredible time that we're facing together as a world family with this COVID-19 pandemic, we've had so many people reach out to us, Dr. Carl, and looking for answers. They're in all the worst places. You know, this disease favors no one. Prince Charles, the future King of England, has gotten it. Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, has gotten. We're hearing celebrities, and everybody is affected by this, from the poorest to the richest, every part of our society. And so that's also very similar to diseases that we work with. Again, depression, anxiety, substance addiction, process addictions, whether it be alcohol, sex, pornography, gambling, overeating. They're also they don't favor anyone. Everyone struggles and suffers with these. But today, we're especially wanting to talk about those folks that are isolated in their homes all over the world and are struggling. And so we've talked about depression, we've talked about anxiety, we've talked about trauma. But one thing I wanted to talk to you about especially is, what are some of the medications and what are some of the interventions that we can use to treat some of these diseases? If we could first talk about some of the medications. We understand there's not a medication in the world that's going to heal any of these diseases. They just rather ameliorate the symptoms so we can start injecting truth into people's brains, right? But what are some of the other interventions that we can use and that we use here at Honey Lake Clinic?
Sure, yeah. So whenever people struggle with behavioral health issues, there's something wrong with the biochemistry of their brain. Now, biochemically, our brain can be affected by chemical things, so sometimes medically, whether it's a thyroid condition, whether it's cardiac problems, could be substances like alcohol or drugs, could be kidney or liver disease. So things are going to affect our biochemistry. The other thing that affects our biochemistry is our decision making. So we make good decisions, our brain chemistry gets better. Decision making is the exercise for the brain. When we make poor decisions, our brain chemistry gets injured, or we call it chemical imbalance, is one of the terms we use in psychiatry, or short-circuited, of our brain circuits. So as we look at treatments usually in one of two categories. Either our somatic therapies or body therapies, those chemical interventions, or talk therapies, that psychotherapy bucket. So as we look at the somatic therapies, the most common one is medications. And so there's a lot of different psychiatric medications. I've been prescribing them for 31 years. A lot of Christians think they're evil or they're heresy, but they're not evil. They're gifts from God. They're miracles. They don't cure anything. So a lot of my medical colleagues believe that they can cure things. So just take this medication, you'll be fine. They don't cure these psychiatric conditions of anxiety or depression or panic attacks, or with COVID, we're probably going to see an increase in OCD because of cleanliness and those kind of things. But medications are very helpful in reducing the symptoms to allow a person to learn the skills that are going to renew their mind. So medications are one thing. Another thing that can affect our biochemistry of our brain pretty quickly is something called TMS, transcranial magnetic stimulation. So it's almost like ECT, which is electroconvulsive therapy, where you have to apply a very big current to the brain to sort of restart the brain. TMS is applying just a very mild current through using magnetic fields. And we've had some profound benefits for people with anxiety or depression, PTSD, but mainly for depression with TMS. Another sort of biochemical intervention is training the brain using neurofeedback to sort of rechannel or rewire the brain as far as the brain frequencies. So there's certain frequencies that are most optimal for the brain to work in and for various places of the brain to work in. So neurofeedback, TMS, and medications are the three most common, with medications being by far 90% of the intervention for most people with psychiatric illnesses, and that's what we use here at Honey Lake. Now, the talk therapies can be a whole assortment of things. There's classic talk therapy or psychotherapy with an individual therapist. But there's also EMDR, which is a form of treating people with past trauma and difficulties with trauma and help them reprocessing that trauma. There's experiential therapies like psychodrama or equine assisted therapy or movement therapy or ropes courses. Then there's supportive therapy, there's group therapy, there's couples therapy. There's a whole bunch of talk therapy. The talk therapy is sort of the longer lasting therapy on the biochemistry as they teach skills that hopefully a person will learn, practice, and become more equipped with and have penetration of those skills long term in their life. But they don't work acutely. So oftentimes we're using sort of the acute biological interventions to sort of patch or put a Band-Aid on that brain circuit while we're waiting for the skills to be practiced, to be learned, for me to trust my therapist enough to be able to take what they're telling me, to be able to absorb it, trust it, start to learn it, start to apply it for that long-term renewing of the mind and transforming of the lives that we see here at Honey Lake.
Yeah, you mentioned our TMS machine. This is even hard for me to pronounce. It's a transcranial magnetic stimulation machine.
Correct.
And as far as I know, we are the only behavioral health treatment center in the world that has one, except for Boston University. So we're super excited. All truth is God's truth. He's designed the universe. Even though some things aren't in the scripture, I have my vehicle, and if it breaks down, I'm certainly not going to go to the Bible to learn how to, change or fix the car. But everything that makes that engine work, the gravity of the universe, all the principles that work around it are all God's truth. So here at Honey Lake Clinic, we like to use anything that's evidence-based, anything that has been proven over a period of time. But I think we've probably learned more about the brain in the last couple of years than all human history put together.
Yeah, the 90s was the decade of the brain. There was tons of research money spent on understanding what the brain is, and then we've got all the wealth of that findings from like 2000 on, and we're starting to put that into application. But if we look at COVID, COVID, one of the more prominent symptoms is cough. Now, not every time a person coughs is it COVID. So sometimes it's COVID, but sometimes it could be a hot dog caught in your throat. Sometimes it could be allergies. So we don't treat COVID with a Heimlich maneuver. We don't treat a hot dog caught in your throat with an antibiotic. So depression, anxiety, I think those are what we call superficial symptoms, just like a cough is a superficial symptom. There's many causes for a cough, and there's many causes for depression and anxiety. And so trying to figure out, boy, God has made our mind very complex. There's the psychological sphere, there's the spiritual sphere, and the biochemical sphere. And what we try to do is we want to address all three of those spheres at the same time, because whenever we're struggling in a way that our functioning is being impacted or where there's distress, there's usually compromise in all three of those spheres. There's spiritual compromise, psychological compromise, and physical or biochemical compromise. So trying to hit it with all three spheres as best as possible using, like you said, evidence-based interventions, whether it be the TMS machine, whether it be psychiatric medications. We know that psychological skills and spiritual skills, truths, absolutes, connecting with God are so powerful. And as we've discussed in the past, community, being able to relate, being able to connect to. Because I could learn a lot of skills, but if I don't have somebody to practice with, somebody to give me feedback, my skills aren't going to go anywhere. All these skills about me getting better and having a better relationship with myself are going to be played out with me communing with God and relating to Him and communing with peers, whether that's my wife, kids, friends, colleagues, business associates. So we have a powerful community here, both of patients and staff coming together. There's sort of, division because of what our tasks are, but as far as brothers and sisters in Christ, there really is no division, and we're here to collaborate with each other, to help each other, to serve each other in powerful ways. And I think for a lot of this kind of situation with COVID, there's this social isolation, but isolation doesn't mean loneliness. So for those people that are home, whether because of depression, because of pandemic, because of isolation, you don't have to be lonely. How to be able to connect with God, how to pray to God. To me, God answers my prayers one of two ways. Either, yes, that's the right thing, Carl. You prayed for the right thing, I'm going to grant it to you. Or no, that's not the right thing. I have something better for you. And so He gives me something better than I ever could have imagined or prayed for. So connecting to God through prayer and reading the Word, connecting with yourself by just journaling. starting to understand yourself better and learning who you are. And then certainly, whether through FaceTime, whether through email, through internet, through phone calls, how to connect with those people in your home by playing games and hanging out and studying the Word, having a movie night, or reaching out to people that you're not able to have social contact with, but you can still have a lot of connection with via the technology that we have available to us to connect to people.
I'm thinking, many of our patients come to Honey Lake Clinic, and if they were going to be healed with words, they would have been healed a long time ago. We use the cognitive therapies, the CBT, the DBT, but we find that mostly it's those experiential therapies, the equine therapy, the body movement therapy, the art therapy, and it's when the Holy Spirit and our spirit join together, and in that transaction, there's an anointing that allows us to begin to make those decisions in the right directions. And ultimately what we've been talking about is it's the decision making, that daily, step by step, trying to apply God's Word and God's truth in our lives. Friends, we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back.
Hi, my name is Tim. I'm from Atlanta. I have been here at Honey Lake Clinic for about 1 month now. I was here due to alcoholism and substance abuse. I struggled with several major issues. I went through 2 divorces in the past several years, and due to that, I spiraled out of control due again to alcohol and substance abuse. When I arrived here at Honey Lake, I was again a complete mess. Had been drinking, was hungover, felt horrible. Honey Lake Clinic, their staff is phenomenal. They took over immediately. The check-in was easy. They brought me in, did an initial screening, and immediately started preparing me for detox. It was 3 days. They had me feeling great after 3 days. After the detox, I started getting involved with the classes. They immediately put you on a schedule of different classes throughout the day. We do give free time. The amenities here made it a lot easier for me. They have a gym, which is phenomenal. They have a pool, which is heated. They have a hot tub. They have a spa, which is great. Massages, pedicures, manicures, haircuts. It makes it through your process here and getting over your addiction a whole lot better. It's very important that you feel comfortable through this transition in your life. Dr. Danny, he's my psych doctor. My doctor he's great. There's a neuro unit which actually does a neuro brain test on you and helps your brain waves. It's great. They bring people here like on the weekends that are weekend encounters. These guys are great speakers. They talk about God, they talk about life, they talk about how to get yourself back on track. Without God, it's very hard to forgive you, other people, or any aspects of your life. I have never, ever would have imagined that I would be in this spot right now where I'm actually truly happy. It is 100% what I needed, what has helped me to leave here and have the tools to live the rest of my life alcohol-free, drug-free. Honey Lake Clinic has been the very single most best decision I've ever made in my life.
Welcome back, family. We're here today with Dr. Carl Benzo at Honey Lake Clinic. And here we specifically treat substance abuse addictions, but also more specifically mood disorders, depression, anxiety, bipolar, borderline, OCD, self-harm. Dr. Carl, we're at a very unusual time in history right now. We're really, the world is sort of realizing that we're all in the same boat. We're all on the same planet. I don't know whether you call it globalization or whatever it is. There's a lot of finger pointing, of course, but I think with the common man, there's an understanding that really we're not that much different. We're all afraid of death, and we all struggle with fear and depression and anxiety. We've talked about some of the therapeutic elements that we use, but many of those aren't available to folks at home right now. Could we be really practical right now for those folks sitting at home all around the world? What are some therapeutic interventions and elements that they could use to bring some peace and joy into their space?
Yeah, I think that there's things that biologically can help. Certainly good nutrition. Right now with the pandemic and not being able to go shop and those kind of things, just being able to have good nutrition, regular meals, good healthy meals, getting sleep. You know, if people are laid off or they're not going to work, we sort of get out of sync as far as schedule and routine. So being able to keep in some kind of routine, going to bed at a certain time every night, waking up at a certain time, whatever you can keep from your old routine is real important to have, some of that familiarity. That's the way our body works best and functions the best. Being able to have some exercise and get some physical activity is real important physically. So those are some physical aspects. As far as relationship, real important. So just because we're isolating doesn't mean we're lonely. So how do we connect with those people in our house, those people in our family, using technology to connect with people, FaceTime, relatives, friends, old friends even that you haven't had contact with in a while, how to be able to connect to. Certainly that spiritual connection with God through prayer, through Bible reading is real important. And then for yourself, well, how do you focus on yourself? How to take a look at some journaling, how to take a look at some activities. Maybe there's an activity that you've always been putting off and saying, well, but if I only had some extra time, I would love to pick up the guitar or learn to paint, or, well, here's some extra time. Some chance to do something that can be part of expression, part of understanding yourself, part of taking a look and saying, maybe doing a timeline of your life, going through your scrapbook and taking a look at who you are. What got you to this point? Do you like the trajectory? Would you like to be on a different trajectory? What does that look like? Taking a look at the COVID situation and realizing, wow, I don't have as much control of my life as I thought. How do I give control up to God and then be a better steward of the opportunities He's given me now, given my time to be able to focus on things a little differently than I had in the past. So those are some interventions that we can do in our house to help people take a movement forward. Certainly if you're really struggling, distress, really having troubles coping, try to reach out to somebody that is in some kind of authority in your life, whether that's your pastor, whether that's a Sunday school teacher, whether that's a parent, a sibling that you look up to for mentorship or discipleship. A lot of AA meetings, NA meetings are going online so that there can be some connection there with some treatment situations. If you're in treatment with a therapist, try to, if they are able to do online or teleconference or telehealth with you, pick up the phone and try to connect with them as well to be able to not fall through the cracks during this more significant and stressful time.
Great. We're getting so many people calling in that really had victory over a lot of sin or what we like to call inappropriate soothing mechanism. Anytime God is really our only firm foundation. He is really our only appropriate soothing mechanism. Anything else is really an idol. Anything else we try to anchor our life in is shifting sand, right? But we have so many people calling and they're lapsing back into their old habits. Of course, the good news is that good habits are as hard to break as bad habits. Just try not to brush your teeth tomorrow morning. You'll find the brain loves automatic, right? Anything the brain can shove back to the back of the brain from the conscious mind and do automatically, it loves. But for those people out there that are struggling right now, they're thinking about taking that drink again, or Johnny Walker tells the truth, people lie, pornography, drug addiction, maybe even cigarettes. What are some practical steps that we can take to stop that boulder rolling down the hill? Because obviously the safest place to stop that boulder is before it starts rolling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think trying to take some inventory and saying, hey, where am I at? What's going on? And, sometimes it's as easy as just taking that piece of paper and, making a line down the middle and say, what are the pros and cons? Taking that drink, clicking on that link to pornography, getting back to cigarettes, whatever that vice was, whether it's control, whether it's power. We have some people that are spending is an issue. So now they're starting to go online, and there's Amazon, spend, click, buy, credit card number kind of thing. Certainly we have a lot of our society that has struggled with eating. And so now with boredom, needing stimulation, needing comfort, I'm going to drown my sorrows either with alcohol or I'm going to eat them away by eating. So, taking a look and seeing, well, what are the benefits I'm really going to get from that? Does it really deliver on that promise of that peace, that joy? Yeah, there might be instant gratification of 2 seconds, 15 seconds, whatever. But what is it really going to get me, and what is the damage that it's going to cause? How do I reach out to some other people? If you have other people in your life, other people in your home that know you, that can help you with more positive coping skills, because all this is a coping skill gone destructive. right? That's all addictions are. So we're trying to cope with circumstances. No addiction comes out of the blue. No addiction is primary. There's always psychological stuff beneath it that we're trying to soothe, escape, anesthetize, self-medicate. So what is that stuff that I'm trying to soothe? Let me take a look at that and see, well, what is going to be a more healthy way to cope with that, that's going to cause me or bring more positive ripples in my life, rather than this one coping skill that might get anesthesia for 10 minutes, but is going to have so much more destruction in my life. Can we really afford more destruction right now with all the stuff that's going on? It's, what's the ROI on that choice? And like you said, it all comes down to decision making. There's pros and cons to each decision, each option that we have, how to be able to lay them out and, do paper and pencil, make it real simple and real concrete for yourself, and be honest with yourself about, what are you really looking for? And is it really going to happen through this, whatever the vice is?
Yeah. You mentioned again community and relationship. And, we all know, I have a history of addiction. All of us have a history of inappropriate acting out, soothing mechanisms. But I think in those relationships, our brain lies to us all the time. And it can make something, with the enemy's help, sound so plausible. Well, I'm just going to have one drink. I'm just going to look at one pornography clip, or I'm just going to go to the fridge and have a celery stick, or whatever that looks like. And I think in my own life, I have what I call my emergency list. I have those first 4 or 5 friends that I can call, because I know without a doubt the first 3 are probably going to be busy. So I try to make it 4 or 5. And it's amazing how something so intelligent in your brain can sound so stupid when you actually share it with a friend. So a thought becomes a decision becomes an action. Usually that nexus between the thought and the decision either is fear-driven or peace and joy-driven. But where in that decision-making process can we establish, usually it's a reaction, not a response. Usually we're like deer in the headlights and we just move immediately to that dysfunctional familiar decision because it goes into our amygdala, which is the emotional center of the brain. I see, that data coming in. Basically, I see it, you get data, then the next step is information, then knowledge, then wisdom. Where do you stop that thought decision from making a good godly decision and making a bad decision?
Yeah, for me and a lot of people I've worked with, pain is a real sort of fork in the road. And so oftentimes it's that pain, those uncomfortable feelings, whether it's loneliness, whether it's sadness, rejection, isolation. We lose our job, so I don't have any value, I don't have any meaning, I don't have any purpose, I can't provide for my family, I'm worthless, I'm a failure. It's those kind of uncomfortable, painful feelings that then sort of make that me-centered, knee-jerk emotional response look a lot more viable to us. Yeah. So being able to sort of slow it down and saying, what are those emotions that are happening? How do I bring down that emotional volume so I can start to think and not just make decisions based on my emotions in the process? And being able to sort through that, sometimes we have that emergency list, like you say, well, who are those people that I can be a sounding board? How can I write that down? Sometimes putting it on paper and reading it back to ourselves, like you say, now it's coming out loud. Because up here, things just swirl. Our brain is very powerful. It can go through a bunch of scenarios and situations. But when we start to write it down, it starts to become more practical.
Right.
Oh, here's what it's actually going to look like, and here's how it'll play out with pros and cons, or forks in the road, however you want to put the diagram out. So being able to have some emotional understanding and say, well, what is really going to soothe this emotion? We don't want to make decisions out of emotions. That's usually destructive. Solomon is the wisest person of all time, but he starts to go downhill when it says in, I forget what chapter in Kings, and Solomon loved many women. So it was his emotions that started to lead him down that wrong track that put him into a big tailspin. And that's the way we get. Yeah. We have pain, we have anxiety, we have depression, we have sadness or anger, and it starts to lead us down that wrong path. And what we need to do is try to figure out, with God, where's He in this? Is this me calling my shots, or am I looking for godly wisdom, for godly guidance? What does the Word say about this? Am I spending time in the Word as I'm making the decision, or I've thrown that aside and I'm just chugging on my own? And usually when we're chugging on our own, we're usually not going to do very well. We're going down the wrong path.
I like what you said, that these, here at Honey Lake Clinic, we call those outcomes, the way we soothe ourselves, we call that bitter fruit. You can chase bitter fruit all the time. You see these kids down in Disney World, well, not today, but stepping on a fountain and then it pops up somewhere else. So we've taken care of the alcohol program, and then eating pops up over here. So that's the bitter fruit. What's underlying all that is the spiritual and emotional challenge, what we call the bitter root. And what we're trying to do here at Honey Lake Clinic is pull out that bitter root and replace it with a seed of truth, a seed of truth that will grow into that better decision-making process. How do we begin to identify that bitter root? Besides the obvious symptoms, how do we identify that in ourselves?
Well, so many times, some people are able to look back at their past and say, hey, look, I have these situations that occurred that have really distorted my lenses or were real turning points in my life. For most people, especially people just starting out in therapy or treatment, it's really hard to identify those. So we start with the present and say, okay, well, why did you make this particular decision? What was the data that you were using or the information that you used to make this particular decision? Or when did you feel like that? Well, because I was angry. Well, when did you feel that kind of anger in the past? Or and so as we start to take a look, when a person comes in, it's like a movie. I'm just seeing one frame of your movie. So it's hard for me to tell what happened before and what's going to happen from here by just one frame. But the more I hear of the past frames of the movie and what happened up to this point, the better understanding I have of who you are now, and a more predictive value of, well, if things continue this way, here's how this movie's going to play out. And so what we try to do here at Honey Lake, and what good therapy is trying to unpack, well, what was the rest of my movie? Because most people haven't really ever unpacked their movie. Right. They want to shove that under the carpet and put it in a box and hopefully throw it at the bottom of the ocean because it's so painful. Right. And so we want to unpack it, just like cancer. It's never easy to get out of cancer, but through radiation, through chemo, through surgery, through painful interventions, we're going to go in and pull out that cancer, that tumor. And so therapy isn't the most comfortable sometimes because we got to dig in and unearth some of those situations, some of those past experiences, and our faulty interpretations. Satan wants to get in there and put lies in, and he uses those experiences as a place to plant lies about who we are, who God is, what's right, what's healthy, where peace really lies. Yeah. And so that's what we do here as we start to unpack a person's life. And as they start to explore, now they see cause and effect. Because we just didn't wake up today and get this brain and brain chemistry today. It's sum and substance of all these different dominoes 1 through 479, that got me to this point. But if I don't understand those dominoes, it's going to be impossible to figure out who I am now. Sometimes it's difficult and has pain, but that's part of the important process.
Thank you, Dr. Carl. Family, thank you so much for being with us today. We live in a fallen world. There's disease, there's sin. It's not the way God created this planet, but because of sin and because we believed the lies of the enemy, this is the shape we're in today. We all experience trauma. It may be little, it may be large. But one thing that is common when we do experience trauma, the first thing that happens is the enemy comes in and begins to attack our primary identity, and that is our relationship with Jesus Christ. And he does that by planting what we call seeds of shame. These are the lies that he plants in our heart, in our mind, in our spirit, that just begin to sound like a broken record over and over again. You know that voice. I'm a failure. I'm a loser. I'll never be good enough. If people really knew who I was, they would never love me. They would not want to be with me. And because we're all living in such close proximity right now, that stuff is easier to tell and over to see. Sometimes we can hide it when we leave for the office or go and do other things, but we live together and we're able to see all the ugliness of each other. And so, when we do that, we begin to say, I'm the only one that can take care of my own needs. I know my family loves me. I know they care for me, but they don't understand me. My friends, they have their own lives, their own agenda. Even God, sometimes I'm almost too embarrassed to go to him, too ashamed. Sometimes I wonder if he even exists or knows who I am. That's a mountain load of shame and guilt. And if sometimes we don't have the faith to take all that garbage where it belongs, which is at the cross of Christ, and leave it there, and just say, hey, devil, you're right. Never going to be perfect in this lifetime. But you know what else? We're just not going to have that conversation anymore. You want to have that conversation, you're going to have it with the sovereign God of the universe. He loves me. I love him. He's my Father, and I'm his. That's the prayer we need to speak into our lives, to ourselves and every one of us. Family, we love you. We're here 24/7. Go with God. Good things are going to come because God is in control. God bless.